Welcome back. Welcome back to the Soluna podcast. I'm John Belizaire, CEO of Soluna. Today we're going to talk about tokens, ICOs, scams, all sorts of stuff, blockchain. And with me today are Murat, who's going to be joining us, and also Phillip.
Hello.
Hello,
Hey.
guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Is this your first podcast, guys?
This is my first podcast.
It's not my first podcast, but I do
All
agree
right.
that audio
Excuse
is
me,
gold.
we got a pro here.
My name is Murat Akdeniz. I'm the founder of Mirian, which is essentially a social investment company that utilizes Ethereum smart contracts to launch essentially micro mutual funds between you and your friends, so you can invest together. And
It's like an investment club?
it's sort of it's an automated and decentralized, really
A
next
decentralized
generation
investment club.
investment club.
Did it just win an award or something?
Yeah, we did at Ethereum's developers conference in Toronto. We won several awards and community interest and exposure, which is the greatest pluses from that. But yeah,
He's so modest. Isn't he?
You got
This one is huge award, By the way, he's like one of the smartest guy we know when it comes to
thank you.
blockchain. That's why we brought him.
That's
we made
exactly
him
right.
Thank you. Years of
Murat
experience.
is one of our advisors, by the way. He's on our advisory board.
That's correct.
You're a Cornellian?
I am a Cornellian. I'm a Cornell Techian, which
I'm
is
a
even
Cornellian too.
a newer thing. But yeah, Cornellian through and through, and that's how we found each other.
Phil, what's your story?
So I am Soluna's head of business development partnerships.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm still learning what it means. Every day it involves a new thing, usually with John sending me emails at 11 o'clock at night saying, can you get this out by tomorrow morning?
Oh no.
So,
I do that a lot.
Yeah.
Murat, you want to work here?
Maybe.
But essentially what it
Too
is
much
is
on my plate.
involving any partnerships with external parties that we might do, law firms, banking, all the way down to local governments, just working with helping enable Soluna's business operations succeed.
And what did you do before that?
So before that, I was at Brookstone Partners, which is the private equity firm, which is backing Soluna.
Yeah.
And I was an associate there for about a year and a half. And before that, I was in professional services at Ernst & Young and Deloitte in their advisory group, helping with mostly transaction-related work.
And you spent some time in Chile?
Yeah.
You speak Spanish?
And before that...
You know he speaks Spanish?
Yeah. But I'm not going to speak it on this podcast.
Why not?
You have
Audio
to-
is
you have to
gold.
meet me- you
Audio
have to
is
meet
gold,
me in
Phil.
person.
We're going to talk about tokens, coins, networks, equity. What is an ICO?
What is an ICO? Well, it stands for initial coin offering, obviously, but the term wasn't around when the concept was introduced after Bitcoin, right? Everyone, since the code base was open source, everyone thought, hey, I can launch my own blockchain. Why don't I do that? Well, the big problem is obviously not many people are going to run your nodes, but once people started doing...
What does that mean if somebody doesn't run your node?
Right. You need to provide incentive mechanisms such that people will have an incentive to participate in your network, right? Why should somebody give you or your network their computation resources, right?
So like in Bitcoin, they do that through this whole mining process, right?
Right,
So,
and it has the advantage of being the first, obviously. So the first people who thought they could generate revenue by mining would connect to Bitcoin. Obviously, they wouldn't connect to some random coin that would come up.
Right.
And yeah, the concept of an ICO goes back to, I guess, when things like Dogecoin and Litecoin and all those others came about. Even though most of them did not do an ICO, they didn't say, hey, we're going to have all these tokens, but they just launched it up, similar to Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin was launched up; it was all ready to go, and you could now the coin itself was traded on some exchanges, so you could purchase some and then participate in the network one way or another.
But what was the purpose of the coin? I mean, I guess Bitcoin, you can ask the same question, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole episode
That's a whole
episode.
That's a whole episode by itself when you think about it.
But what did these other coins believe that they were doing any different than Bitcoin, right?
Or if I can restate the question, Bitcoin was trying to be a currency,
right?
A digital form of money or a digital form of gold, whatever you want to call it. What were other tokens or coins that were being sold were they trying to do the same thing, or were they trying to do something different?
The meme coin, essentially, you could throw somebody a few thousand Dogecoin to, tell them you support their meme or whatever. And it didn't really have a monetary value up until recently when it, I think, reached a $2 billion market cap, which for people who saw it as a meme coin is pretty outrageous.
Right.
But when you think about Litecoin said, hey, the supply cap of Bitcoin is, we disagree with how it should be, or, hey, we're just going to make it this way. And they raised the supply cap from 21 million to 90 million at the time. So there was more supply, more people could have more coins for cheaper, essentially. And it was moving faster, I think, at the time, because the Bitcoin blocks were getting, lots of transactions were happening on Bitcoin. So you could send things faster on.
But was Lite like a different network? I mean, it's
essentially, but it is just a copy paste of the.
So it's a fork, or what they call a fork, right?
It's barely. We shouldn't give it too much credit, but it's its own thing for sure.
Okay, got it. So those guys didn't raise an ICO. Right.
No.
What's an example of of something that's an ICO, so we can better understand what that is?
Well,
so is that something that is not a currency?
It could be, right? So Ripple, when you think about it, I'm not exactly sure whether they had an ICO or not, but Ripple's more of a currency, right? But when you think about Ethereum Classic, which did have an ICO, it had a coin offering, and you had a claim on to the first Ethereum Classic coins based on how much you contributed. And I think the raise was about 15 million. But at the time, it was very exciting because it was one of the first projects that truly had a value proposition beyond what was being thrown around, and this concept of smart contracts. People didn't understand even what the possibilities, what the use cases were, but now we're starting to understand that, and it's obviously revolutionary. And the fact that Ethereum introduced this concept of having a token without its own network. Which for developers such as me, who were building things in 2014, 15, is a game changer, because now I don't have to worry about how do I incentivize more people to do my nodes and run my software. But now I can just build what I want to without having to worry about the security of the underlying network, which is very revolutionary.
So let me do a definition check here. So a coin is something that's running on its own network with nodes. People are mining or doing something to process transactions. And
it sounds like the purposes of the network is to create that coin.
To be a medium of exchange.
Yeah, most of the time, yes.
And so it's a currency, yeah.
And then Ethereum comes out, and they come up with a smart contract. So now you have a token, which sits on the Ethereum network. It rides on those rails.
That's correct.
And you're able to transact. I can send you my Phillip token, and you can send it to John, but you don't need your own network. You can use the Ethereum network.
That's correct. And obviously, when we go into an advanced discussion, there are benefits to having your own network for some purposes. But what's been developed as a plasma architecture, now you're able to utilize Ethereum's own security and network in your own network, where people don't have to rely on the security of your network to do the transaction, even though the computation may be on your network. So we're seeing this development.
So the underlying networks, Ethereum's providing all the security.
That's correct.
And then it's supporting, your token as an infrastructure layer, and you can move things around, that sort of thing.
Or said differently, Ethereum is a currency which incents miners to come to the node, and they want to move away from that. But for today, it's proof of work. You're doing mining. And that's how we secure the network. And then that network can enable things apart from currency.
Yeah, definitely. Ethereum is a currency used to compute smart contracts. That's mainly what its purpose is. But obviously, people can come up with different use cases, and that is the best representation that this is an evolving space.
So an ICO is not, technically a traditional cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, but there's been this technology evolution that's allowed people to create tokens. So what's an ICO? I'm still sort of maybe an idea would be have you ever invested in an ICO?
I've invested in many ICOs.
All right, now we're talking.
Some that are not I'm not as proud of, but my first one is in 2013 when this company NewCoin proposed the idea that different games have different currencies inside them, and we should be able to kind of interchange those currencies such that I can take the diamonds I've hoarded up in my one game.
What game? Can you name the games?
I forget which one diamonds were in, but I was a big time gamer. I don't have as much time anymore. I think my big go-to was the gold. Was the gold in my Warcraft that I really had a lot of, and I wanted to use that as currency in some other game or sell it or something, right?
So you want to take your gold, you want to send it to your Minecraft, whatever.
Right, exactly. And the idea is still being there are many more ICOs that came up with the same idea, and they capture a new audience every time.
So would you advance in the other game, like if you were like in level 2 in one game and level 5 in the other game?
You would start out richer per se, or you could kind of earn that game's currency over time if you thought there was going to be more value for it. And by the way, quick tip here, the gold in that Warcraft game is more valuable than the Venezuelan bolivar as of today. So maybe I should have kept them.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow. That's amazing.
But essentially, they were doing an ICO and they were offering this new coin, and I thought, hey, the thing is, the idea for an ICO or the spending of a Bitcoin was very new. Like, you had a bunch of Bitcoin and you wanted to do something with it. That's why people bought these pizzas and the T-shirts for millions of dollars. And I wanted to participate in one of these, and I wanted to kind of diversify my crypto portfolio, which
away from Bitcoin,
which we wanted to explore. So I sent 3 Bitcoin at the time to New Coin's ICO.
Okay.
And they did deliver. I was skeptical, but they did deliver 2,000 to 3,000 of new coins to me. And it was one of the first projects that had a staking mechanism where you could go onto their website and you could stake your coins, and then a year later you would earn some interest or something on it, because their idea was that they would use those coins that you've staked to give it to new games and have new games participate in their ecosystem, right? It all sounds all nice and great and sounds like an innovative idea.
And what did they promise to do? So you bought into these new coin, which is a very unique name, brilliant name, is it?
2013. Give him some credit.
So you bought some new coin.
NOU? NUE?
I think it was NEUE, but I'm not sure. This was a while back. Okay.
But still, new coin.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you bought into new coin, and the idea was that they would take the money that you invested in new coin to create the new coin network.
Exactly. They would make some partnerships with a bunch of games and have their currencies be interchangeable, essentially.
Okay.
Which made sense when you thought about it, right?
And then ultimately, when the network would be created, you'd be able to use those coins on the network, which is this is where this whole concept of utility coins or utility tokens come from.
Well, it wasn't thought of as such at the time, but definitely with today's terminology.
So what happened next?
I staked my 3,000 new coins at their website, and I thought, hey, you know what? This is a longer term investment. I'm just going to let it sit there and come back. And I think I wanted to check back again in 4 or 6 months, and not only did the coins not exist, but the website just was poof, it was gone.
There you go.
And that was my early ICO lesson in 2013.
Wow. Is there a term for that? I think there's
a shit coin?
I think that's what they call it, a shit coin.
We were aware of the term shit coin at the time.
So
and
new coin was also shit coin.
New coin fell under, there's the utility, security, and shitcoin.
Those three categories.
Most of them fall under the third one.
Right.
Interesting.
But that was my first lesson learned. And
so in this case, your diversification ended up being diversification.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It died with the.
How'd you feel about that? Like, what did that? What was the lesson? So the lesson was.
The thing is, I was so excited about being able to spend my Bitcoin for the first time. And
So you didn't care. Like, this is awesome. I can do something with this stuff.
Well, I kind of had a hunch that it was gonna, not come back or something, but I wanted to see just to put my feet in the water.
Wow.
And the thing is, having done that in 2013,
we have a real live victim.
Probably saved me a lot of money in the future with all these new scam ICOs coming out.
So how'd you approach future investments? Like, did you?
Yeah, so I was tracking Ethereum for a while. I did more due diligence, obviously, but I think the team and watching the team perform over time is one of the best indicatives of performance you can have. So when I heard about Ethereum, I started going on their website. It said blockchain 2.0. I was intrigued by the idea, but I was hesitant with the ICO, right? I wanted to watch them over time. And I did, and it did turn out to be fine. Same thing with the DAO when it happened. I was fascinated by the idea that a decentralized autonomous organization could just function without any centralized entity running it.
What's the DAO? What's that?
Well, essentially, it is a smart contract that manages an organization. It is kind of autonomous in its own way, and many attempts have happened, but a true manifestation of it hasn't really come out yet. But essentially, the first idea for a DAO after Ethereum launched was a smart contract that would have some purposes, and people were so fascinated by the idea that at the time they sent about 15% of the entire network's value worth of Ethereum or of Ether to the DAO.
Wow!
And little did they know that there was a bug in the code and it got hacked. And it was a disaster. So the first, like my first ICO investment, the first attempt at a DAO was also not great, and Ethereum had to decided that they should fork, and Ethereum Classic and Ethereum were born. So the DAO
That's what created those two
one
networks.
Interesting.
I never knew that.
On Ethereum Classic.
Very cool. So let's recap. So I think we know what an ICO is. So an ICO is a fundraising tool for a new network.
Not always, John. Not always.
Oh,
it can be that they're what we call utility tokens now, and what they call payment coins in Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different types of coins, and as Soluna is a security token.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be for fundraising. It might not be for fundraising. It might be to gain access to a network. It might be to make a specific sort of payment, such as in the case of Ethereum, you pay to compute smart contracts. So there are different use cases coming up.
Got it. So the initial, so an ICO initial coin offering is really the first introduction of a coin
or token
to or token to the universe, right?
Yep.
And it sounds like it's powered by the Ethereum network these days.
Most of the time, because of that freedom that
you don't have to build a whole
foundation
network
gave
from scratch, right?
to developers like us. Yeah.
And but why does there seem to be sort of a pull away from investing in these types of products and a movement toward what we're going to be, which is a security token? What's your take on that, Phil?
Right. So, anytime a lot of money starts moving around quickly and there's big changes in price, there's two things that happen. One, scammers enter the market, and two, maybe not as quickly thereafter, but shortly thereafter, the regulators follow. So in the case of the ICOs, what we saw...
Thanks for sharing that story, by the way.
No worries.
Cool. Your honesty.
Yeah. That was
brought us all a little bit closer.
Yeah.
I've also lost money investing before.
Well, haven't we all?
I mean, we all have.
Yeah.
But it wasn't new coin.
No, it was not a new coin. It was not on a cryptocurrency.
So you're saying the regulators follow?
The regulators follow, and the thing is that in most countries, and in the U.S. especially, there is a system of rules which are designed to protect your what we'll call retail investors.
Right.
These people who this might be a meaningful amount of money for them. They might not have the same amount of financial acumen or sophistication that others might possess. And for a long time, way as far back as humankind has recorded history, basically people have promised things and not delivered, and they're taking a bunch of money at the beginning.
We know,
in exchange for nothing.
Right.
So what an ICO has transformed into, which was a cool way to get distribution of a new, whatever you want to call this asset class, or a new token, a new coin,
Definitely.
was a way for a lot of people to put a bunch of money in a suitcase and disappear.
Right.
And so regulators are looking at this now, and they're saying, they've said two things. One, they've said, we think this is an exciting space. Especially in the U.S. and in many European countries, they said, we want to enable this ecosystem. We want to encourage it. We think this is a very important step function in our technology. Which is great.
Yeah.
But they also said, we also don't want a bunch of moms and dads and young folk to lose their retirement savings, their college fund, whatever, speculating on
we don't want young Murats,
young Murats, blowing their
Bitcoin,
their Cornell student loans on shitcoin.
Yeah, exactly.
So the way that the SEC specifically has approached this is by saying, examining coin offerings and saying, is this under U.S. law what would constitute a security, which is something that you put money into and you expect to get money back from plus a gain without doing any work of your own. That's what's called the Howey Test.
Right.
And the SEC is very concerned about this right now. And what they have done, or what I've observed personally as I've been following the space, is that they have made very targeted and direct actions at actors who are, 2 or 3 standard deviations away from what the median market is doing. So they're not, what I've observed at least, is that they're not going after people who are moving in the flow of traffic, as we'd call it.
Right.
But instead they're going for those guys who are saying you can 100x your money in a week.
Right.
Or
making huge promises.
Yeah. Or they're also looking at,
like that guy on Bitcoin Connect. Is it Bitcoin Connect?
Bitcoin Connect.
You should all look that up. We're going to put that in the show notes.
Peculiar
folks,
things happen.
yeah,
I would say.
definitely.
Yeah.
A lot of people are they're taking pyramid schemes that existed in the real world and they're putting it on the blockchain.
Tokenizing them.
Yeah, tokenizing
Right.
Pyramid schemes. So,
Right.
so the SEC is looking at and they're saying there are thresholds that you have to comply with if you are in fact selling a security. If you are in fact selling something where I'm going to promise you or I'm going to seek to give you financial gain without making you do any additional work.
Right.
So that's number one. Number two, they're also looking at KYC AML, which is know your customer, anti-money laundering rules. They want to make sure this money is not ending up in the hands of terrorists.
Yeah.
Right.
They want to know that it's not ending up in criminal organizations.
Right.
And so they're going after people who are not complying with those 2 rules.
Right.
So now we have a world where people have been trying to create networks, which became this very effective fundraising tool. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars raised year to date in 2018.
Yeah, it's amazing.
More money that's going
unbelievable.
out.
Yeah. And it's growing every
and
year.
It's growing.
It's
And
bigger this year than it was
it's bigger
last year.
this year, even though overall cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and Ethereum has come down.
Value,
We're still raising more. And what's interesting though is, so I was just looking before the call. I mean, ICOs are up almost 20% year to date. So more money has been raised year to date than it was in 2017. But Bitcoin prices have come way down.
That's correct.
And now there's a couple of things that are throwing that off. One is there's been some huge marquee raises, like the Petro, like Telegram, depending on who aggregates the data. So that's one thing. But the other thing that you'll notice is that ICOs overall, the number of ICO projects that are raising money has come down as well.
Yep.
Right.
So we're seeing
the number of
less
projects come down, but the amount they're raising
is
gone up.
more. Right.
And that's in the face of declining prices of cryptocurrencies.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very
So I
interesting.
think it goes back to your question on what we're seeing in this market. We're seeing more compliant. They're not security tokens per se, but they're definitely compliant, or to some degree they've put some effort to comply with regulations.
Yep.
It makes the average investor a lot more comfortable in putting their money in, such that they're not a 2013 Murat investing into new coin once again.
I'm never going to forget that story.
Yeah.
First of all, new coin is hard to forget.
Hey, and it's 3 Bitcoin.
And
I mean,
3
at the
Bitcoin.
time wasn't
lot.
much,
That's
but
a lot of
today
money.
it's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
But
but
take a
We
nice
won't say how much
vacation.
money it is because
Yeah.
by next week,
By next week.
we'll be like 2 times off, 3 times
Exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. We'll bracket that in. So let's talk about what we're going to do. I mean, we are going to be raising capital.
off. Right.
And Murat referred to this concept of a security token. What's a security token versus an ICO?
So I would say that security tokens are a class within ICOs.
Mm-hmm.
And the debate right now to be decided is how much of that class is it? Is it, as some of our lawyers would like to persuade us, all ICOs are securities, and so you need to sign up for their services for any ICO you do.
Right.
Or as many people who are on the other side of the fence are saying, it's less.
Yeah.
The greatest analogy I've heard to that, and this came from the some SEC regulators, I think, is The distinction is, think about a laundry shop, right? If you're selling the token and the laundry shop isn't there, if the laundromats aren't there, then it's a security, right? But if you're selling the token and it's there and you can just put it in and use the machine, then it's a utility token. Right. And I think this has been a very easy determinant for lots of people to see whether the token is
It's also a very
security or
high
not.
bar because most
Definitely.
ICOs don't have anything other than a team.
That's correct.
Right.
That's
All
correct.
right. So John, let's flip it over to you. So this is the world. This is the information that we had presented to us as we were building the Soluna business model.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came on, I came from the traditional, good old fashioned, you raise money by selling equity, right? You go to a venture capitalist, you present the business plan, a thesis, an incredible team, hopefully, and you talk about a big market that you're going to go after, and you raise money to fund that company through a series of equity sales. And there's all sorts of regulations around that, which I'm used to. And when I started looking at the blockchain space, what I learned very quickly was that, it was very different, obviously. And I think the big difference is, in the example I talked about, you're raising money for an actual company. It's a centralized organization, right? And you're selling ownership in that centralized organization. In the blockchain world, well, there isn't any John's new code that you're raising money for. It's a network, like we've been talking about, that provides a service or is building a community and offering participation in that community. How do you raise money for something like that? Well, the VCs didn't really understand what to do with that. And through the whole Bitcoin experience, it became clear that there's value created by creating a network that has value in the coin itself. And so maybe you could raise some money that way. And when I started looking at those two worlds, right, we're sort of not the network, because we're not going to be creating new coin or shit coin, whatever you want to call it. We are a company that has equity. We're owned by a private equity firm, and we're building a company with a team and so forth. And we're going to be an infrastructure company, like I've talked about in the previous episode, if you guys have watched it. We are developing the largest wind farm in the world, and we're going to integrate it with a whole suite of computing facilities to power the blockchain. So we're a vertically integrated blockchain infrastructure company. So when I started looking at that, I thought, well, maybe we should raise money the traditional venture capital way, and that's how we should approach capital. And we started talking about it here at Brookstone and so forth. We says, yeah, that's true, but let's talk about this asset we're going to be building. We're going to be building a $2 billion wind farm, and we're going to develop that over stages, and perhaps offering up a security that would be tied to the asset we're building would be a better approach to raising the capital. It's non-dilutive, but it also gives us the ability to scale. We can offer it to a host of different institutions. And so what we're going to be creating really is a security token that is an asset-backed security, which we think is the way things are going to move to in the future around all of this stuff. And we're pretty excited about it. The first phase is going to raise for building out the initial phase of our wind site. We're not going to talk about the specifics on this podcast, but when we do announce it, you'll learn about all the specifics and all the things that we're going to be raising money for and how that's going to work. But what's different about us is we're not a network, we're an infrastructure company, and we're raising money through this security token framework and technology in a very regulatory compliant way. And that was a decision that we felt was comfortable for us. I also like to describe it a grown-up way of raising money. It's a way to sort of take that to market.
And the thing is, we've spent a lot of effort to make sure that it's fully compliant with U.S. laws. And when you look at the first iterations of tokenized securities such as blockchain capital, a VC that invests in companies like Coinbase, they were compliant, but they weren't compliant in the U.S., so they just barred U.S. investors. But they did it in a legally compliant way, which in a time which was about, I think, mid-2017, when there was a lot of questions about how old world rules kind of apply to this new world of fundraising and technology. Today we have a little bit more clarification in terms of how that's applicable, and obviously Soluna is using that to its advantage to be fully compliant and move forward.
And I like the sort of closed loop we hope it will be a virtuous cycle that we're creating. So jumping back to what Murat said earlier, the initial ICOs were creating their own cryptocurrency, which required nodes and miners. Right. And you might not draw enough attention to power your blockchain because you don't have people working the nodes. So Bitcoin and Ethereum have created these really incredible network effects where people are incented to strengthen the network because of the network strength, which then strengthens the network some more.
Yeah, it's a cycle.
And what we're going to do is we're going to raise capital on the blockchain, but then we're going to create an infrastructure layer which can go out and power nodes for manifold applications.
Definitely.
Across, it doesn't have to be Ethereum. It doesn't have to be Bitcoin. It's going to be the blockchain 3.0 and 4.0 and 6.0.
Yep.
Why don't we leave it there? We're going to power the blockchain, and we're going to do that by raising money through a security token, and you're going to learn more about that when we announce it. And so this is the end of this episode. As I said, time runs out very quickly, but I encourage you guys to look at the other episodes, hit subscribe here on YouTube, join our Telegram group,
definitely,
and also check out our business primer or white paper, choose your term of choice, on our website to learn more about Soluna and our project, where we're building the largest wind farm in the world and integrated with blockchain computing.
It's big.
Thanks for joining.
Powered blockchain.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome.
Yep.